buyout. Buyout is the third exit route I'd like to briefly cover in the slides. Again, we are just in a VC financing round, and we're not doing the exit. So if you want to learn more about a buyout, you can there are many books and all sorts of things. But let's give you a little example what that means and how you might be able to use it as an entrepreneur. There are a lot of forms of buyouts. There's an entrepreneurial buyout, a management buyout. So that always means the entrepreneur is in the driver's seat, the management is in the driver's seat. So in the first case, the founders buy back the shares, or the management buys back the shares, or at least the management tries to buy out other investors. And this is a more structural thing. The buyout is leveraged. So it is not an only equity deal, but there's some debt capital involved. Sometimes it's more than 50% debt capital involved. Look at that more closely if we want to understand that. First of all, maybe we should look at the wording. Buyout means buying parts of the company, and in the buyout structure, especially, someone is bought out. And that could be the case because an investor's fund ends. And the entrepreneurs say, okay, we can't make an exit, and the exit only will be promising in 2 or 3 years because the timing is not right now, but we give you the opportunity to be bought out. It is not an easy structure. And the question is always, is the management able to do that? Because if you have an equity story, you have some value of the company, and the VC has a share of that. How are you able to bring all that money to the other shareholder? In most cases, entrepreneurs don't have it. And that means in most cases, and that's the right side, you need someone else financing the whole structure. So if you know that, you have someone else finance the structure. In most cases, it's a new shareholder who buys the old shares, who restructures maybe the whole financial, the whole cap table of the company. And again, if this is equity investors, they use leverage in order to make it more interesting for themselves. So if your company is up and running, your company makes money, is able to pay for some interest rate, you can use that in order to leverage the thing, the whole deal. So leverage at the very end means significant use of borrowed capital for financing, at least some use. But in most cases, it's significant. It's more than 50%. Can be up to, I mean, we saw buyout structures with 80-90% debt capital. That's not happening nowadays anymore, but still, it happens. And the goal then is to have a return for the new private equity investor. And the management still plays a role, the entrepreneurs plays a role, but they have a new role within the whole financial structure of the deal. If we look at that, what I said at the very beginning, there's an entrepreneurial and management buyout. Entrepreneurial, again, means you try to buy the VCs out of your investor and buy back 100% of the ownership. Management buyout, it's not the founders who do that, but it's the employees who basically do the same thing. And leverage buyout is a structural thing. As I said before, some financial investors, some new, pays out the former investors and is newly on board, which also means, by the way, you have to do the next exit mechanism, or they have to think about the next exit mechanism, because this financial investor, this equity investor, wants to leave your company too. So there you can see it's an easy chart, but in most cases it's a lot more complex than what you can see on the chart, because normally the founders are involved too, and the employees are involved. Maybe one of the founders wants to leave the company, but some of the management wants to be in, and then it gets to the financial structuring, and it's mostly driven by the financial investor. And these investors, they have the patterns of how to structure the deal financially in order that makes sense for them and so on. So that gets more difficult. This also means the buyout is more an exception as an exit route. It happens in some cases. Entrepreneurs are able to use that structure to buy out investors when the fund ends. But in most cases, no one is really able to pay for the shares on the one hand, and most other cases, the company is not really ready for some new investor with a high leverage to come in. This is why buyout cases are more common for like mid-sized firms and larger companies, where large private equity funds do their deals and try to realize their value creation, like try to realize what they have as a business model. Again, shortly, what's the advantage? The disadvantage, if you're able to do a buyout, even in that exceptional way, it's a good way to get rid of investors, but there's low compensation for you, low compensation for the investor, because he can't make it a great deal. There's no 19 billion buyout like the WhatsApp sale. What's the disadvantage? You get no knowledge on board. If you as an entrepreneur buy out old investors, they go off your board. Maybe you don't want them anymore, but they're not shareholders anymore. So your knowledge is even more restricted. And also, if you take a new investor on board, especially in this private equity situation where these guys structure the deal, they very pretty much restrict your influence later on. So this is probably why buyout structures are not really too common in entrepreneurial situations when VCs finance the company.